Happy Halloween, everybody! I hope that everyone is enjoying this spooky holiday. To celebrate, I have painted a crow in the moonlight. Now, this video is formatted a little differently compared to the last video. I sadly do not have any experience or background with crows, but it would be so awesome to do so in the future. However, this time I will be focused on the art process. I wanted to paint an animal in a spooky setting, and crows are often associated with scary things. I mean, a group of them is a murder. So I started off with a sketch to develop what I wanted to do. I then added a splash of color with some acrylic pens to get a good idea of how I wanted the lighting and the feeling of the painting to be. This sketch doesn't have much detail in it because it's meant to be a thumbnail, only showing the basic colors, lighting, and the composition that I want the main painting to have. This is the final thumbnail, which gives off that basic planning that I want, and from there I have this pre-painted black canvas, which is super convenient so I don't have to paint in all those dark areas, and we're going to turn that thumbnail into a painting. This time I am using acrylic paint, not gouache, and so we're going to see how it goes. Here I'm placing my paints into my palette. This time I'm using very basic colors in this particular acrylic paint set, where I'm challenging myself to get better at mixing colors. I then began to sketch on the canvas. This could arguably be the hardest part of the painting process because it is the foundation of the painting. The sketch is where the anatomy, shape, and composition is determined before any paint is added. You can tell I mess around with the face of the crow, where at some point I find myself pleased with the underlying sketch and I begin to paint. I started off with the moon in the background as it shows where the light source is on the painting, which is helpful for me in this context, so I know where to place the highlights on the bird. I start jumping all over the place from the bird onto the background, to adding black, where I'm just kind of jumping around and seeing what seems right. Though at this point I decided to add more black paint to the background to emphasize darker regions and to make those lighter areas pop. I started off with major highlights, and then as I continued painting I add more details, as if I'm painting in the light. Here I'm adding a little bit more pink to the highlights of the bird because there's a little bit of pink in the moon. I then added a bit more of a glow to really emphasize the illumination of the moon. I wanted to try my metallic watercolor set, so I decided to bring that out. I'm going to be using this silver color as it fits the mood of the painting best. It was really fun to apply, but it was definitely weird at first because it was really hard to see because it is silver on a light background. So I played around with it, and then later on I didn't record it, but I smoothed out some of the edges with water. So the blending from that light to darkness is a bit more smooth. After adding the fun sparkles, I am now on to the next fun part, which is adding more clear highlights to the painting. This is done with a white acrylic pen, and this is meant to really emphasize the rim light around the bird. I then added a bit more emphasis on the spooky eye of the bird. I decided not to make it like a regular bird eye, but instead to make it more creepy for the Halloween aesthetic. I then began to add a bit more details to the moon. After finishing up on the moon, I speckled the entire canvas with a bunch of stars. After some final touches, the painting was complete. I am really happy with how this turned out. The lighting in the video doesn't really show the purples and the pinks in the painting, but I really like how it turned out in the end, and I hope you did too. Here I am showing a little bit of the sparkles from the watercolor. It's somewhat there, but it's not very apparent. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and happy Halloween!